We just told you about the flooding that's been occurring in the San Antonio area. This is a live look into that very region where people are in trouble right now. You're looking at live water rescues. We are seeing this for the first time live as you are, and you can see rescue personnel are on site, and there is a car that is definitely not in a good spot. People have climbed up onto the roof, and emergency workers are trying to make a scaffolding, basically, extending a ladder to other rescue workers and other people to get them out of that car. You know, you see a scene like this and you question how they got here in the first place, Alex, right? I mean, this looks like a raging river, and yet you know this is a road and someone just went a little bit too far and got into this very dangerous situation.
Yeah, you got to think that that was the case, that they ended up going through an area that may have been flooded a bit, and they got carried into this position. Looks like they're now backed up against some sort of barrier or of some sort, and that's what's basically keeping them from floating away even further. Thankfully, they got up onto the roof of this vehicle, this SUV, but you can see, look what's pouring out sort of the windows. So the car is fully basically engulfed in that water there, at least inside of it. This person's up on the roof, and luckily now the responders are there. They're able to reach that ladder to them and hopefully get rescued here in the next few moments. But I can only imagine a really, really scary situation here. Look at how fast that water is going. You get in that, you don't have a chance. You're not out swimming that. You're not going to power through that. You're getting taken away.
Yeah, and you can tell that this is not your typical rescue, right? I mean, they are fully extended on that ladder truck, almost completely horizontally. Then they needed another ladder to get to the car itself. And they're still just kind of inching that forward, trying to make sure that there's enough stability for people to be able to walk across that ladder system. Alex, are you able to tell if that is a rescue worker on top of that car already, or if that's maybe just someone who was traveling in that car?
It looks like just a regular person. I mean, it looks like they almost have their backpack on, just a regular maybe polo shirt or T-shirt on. So I think that may be the person they're trying to get to.
Yeah, so these rescuers themselves are going to have to get across that ladder first. Hopefully add some, some cabling and, basically a support structure and a support system tying that person to one of the rescuers. Because if this water's still rising, which, in the past 6 hours or so, much of this area has seen over 6 inches of rain, and it's all rushing down now into the low-lying areas, you could see how this water could continue to climb. Storm specialist Carl Parker also with us here on Weather Center Live, watching this with us. Carl, this is a very scary situation.
The thing that occurs to me while watching this is how daunting of a challenge we're looking at right here. I mean, think about the velocity that's in that water. If you consider the fact that a 1 cubic yard box full of water weighs as much as a smart car, you've got a tremendous amount of weight and force in that water. The fact that the car that he is on is not moving is only because something is blocking it.
Right.
That's the only reason why, is that something is holding it back. And I don't know if we're going to go back to that picture or not, but we've got, it looks like maybe a fence there just off to the left. There's something that's holding the car in place. Were it not for that, that car would be gone. It'd be down the river. And as Alex mentioned, you've got a tremendous velocity there. The best swimmer in the world would not be able to get through this. And look at this. Look how this is on a knife's edge, really, in terms of safety here.
And remember, those rescuers are walking across a regular old ladder at that point, right? So the only thing keeping them between that river of current and dry, pseudo ground are those rungs of the ladder, which are now getting wet from the spray of the ladder, and it's being held down on the ladder from the ladder truck by another worker who's standing on it just to put enough weight to keep that ladder in place. This is the kind of Herculean effort that is going on right now in order to rescue somebody that wound up in this situation.
And it really takes a lot of creativity. Clearly, the ladder from the truck itself was not long enough to extend, so now you're in this situation, an emergency situation. What can we do to now lengthen the ladder that we have? And they thought of it pretty quickly. They got another ladder out to grab this guy, and now they're finally reached him. Looks like they're putting on a life vest because as he goes back across that ladder, just in the event that he were to happen to fall in, as you mentioned, Mark, it's going to be a slippery ladder. He now has at least a life vest on to hopefully keep him afloat.
Yeah, and you know, the rescue personnel are trained for this very thing. I'm sure it's not the first time they've connected the ladder to extend their apparatus, but still, it's not something that you get to practice, luckily, in real life every day. So each time this happens, this is a harrowing situation for the people that are being rescued and for the rescuers themselves. Again, you're talking about 6-hour rainfall totals throughout just about all of Bexar County, at least central and southern portions, of 3 to 5 inches. Some areas even locally a little bit more than that. My goodness, and here comes that long climb to safety. You got to imagine that that is like the longest 4 to 6 feet ever.
Wow.
The thing that occurs to me also looking at this is that clearly no one in their right mind would drive into a situation that was that harrowing. They would never do that, which means that as this person drove through the water that may have been, 6 feet or, 6 inches or a foot deep, it wasn't anything like this. That's the very nature of a flash flood. It happens very rapidly. The water comes up quickly, gets a lot faster very quickly, and that's why we say don't drive through water, because even if it's okay at the time, it can change really dramatically in a short period of time.
So now this guy's getting a chance to slowly walk his way across the ladder. Luckily, this thing looks like it's going to turn out to be a better situation, but it could have really turned ugly really quickly. Looking back on that vehicle, which was basically, if you saw it, there was water actually pouring out the sides of the windows and even the side of the doors. The force of that in the car. The car was essentially in water, submerged. So if he was in that car, he would be drowning. He was very fortunate to get out and get on top.
And thank goodness for the guardrail that was there.
Yes.
Because that's really the only thing that was keeping that car in place instead of being completely washed away. I mean, let's face it, it only takes 6 inches of moving water to knock down a grown adult. It takes about a foot, maybe 2, to float most vehicles. So when you think about the amount of water you're seeing there and the velocity it's moving at, how fast that forward speed is, that car and certainly that person had no shot, no chance to be able to drive out of that, certainly less walk out of that without help from trained personnel.
And that's why I say, when they drove into this,
it was probably nothing like that.
It wasn't that.
Yeah.
It wasn't
You
that.
wouldn't have been able to get that far.
Exactly.
In fact, that car could have been swept away from upstream
from another
for all
place.
we know, and then thrown against that guardrail. I mean, that's what we don't know. What we do know is that successful rescue has just taken place. We're watching some of the rescuers, the rescue personnel, still going through the actions here, going across the fully extended ladder from a ladder rescue truck. And so that's some of the scene that we're watching on the left. On the right, here's some of the facts that we were bringing up. Water weighs a lot, right? 62.4 pounds per cubic feet, and it's flowing downstream. So if a vehicle stalls there, you've got all kinds of force that's hitting the side of that car, Alex.
And it's probably that force that took it down through all this water. And as we've talked about and mentioned here, if it wasn't for that guardrail being where it is, this car would still be floating and going who knows where at that point. So luckily, again, that guardrail was there. It was able to hold up this car and allow for the rescuers to actually get to the individual.
Floating is key, right? Basically, the car is a boat at that point, and it will float just like a boat will float. The buoyancy, the car displaces the water from around it. That's how those huge cruise ships can stay afloat, right? Because they're pushing the water away from them, and so getting balanced out by the force of the water pressing back up. So as the water rises around that car, you're talking about for every foot or two, that car then basically weighing 1,500 pounds less for each foot the water rises. So only about 2 feet. Most vehicles weigh nothing there. Carl.
Guys, we have another view. I don't know if we can take it. Another view of the bridge here. It looks like it was a bridge, and we're looking at the fire truck right in there. So you can see that I guess what happened was he came across this bridge here, and that's when the water came up very rapidly. But you can see that guardrail off to the left, just right in there. So this is one of those things that we always talk about this. We've been talking about this for years. That people get themselves into trouble because they think they're going to be okay, and you have to remember that it's not just your own life that you're taking into your own hands here. You're also endangering the lives of these heroic people that come out to help you out.
It is almost incredible. What you're about to see on the left side of your screen is a view of some of the rescuers standing next to the fire truck itself. And it's amazing almost that they're able to keep their footing because there is a lot of water moving around them. And so what you're seeing is basically two sides of that bridge. Here's the one with the truck that we were following and where the rescue took place. And then you've got another ladder truck on the other side that was also there. But now, Carl, you've got water rising around the fire truck itself and around the people. I mean, if I could get on a loudspeaker, I'd tell these guys to hurry up and get back into the truck so they're not standing there and to move that truck forward.
Yeah, I guess they feel that they've got enough confidence in the situation. And these trucks weigh, a tremendous amount. So, that is in their favor.
But the people don't.
But the people don't. You're right, and you're still not entirely aware of where it goes from here. You may be thinking that it's topping out. But there's really no way to know exactly what lies ahead in terms of where the water's going and what the velocity will be. So, yeah, it definitely seems like a dangerous situation, even for them to be that far into the water.
And you can almost feel the urgency, right? The guys are, some are, kind of surveying what's happening, but they're trying to get out of there. They're cleaning things up as fast as they can, pulling that ladder back in, trying to get their truck ready. For all we know, getting ready to respond to another water rescue, because if there's one, chances are pretty good that there's others across the area, because this is the scope of the amount of water that is currently running through and running off San Antonio right now. Again, a large portion of Bexar County, as well as the counties just to your west. In 6 hours' time, 3, 5, even 7 inches of rain. You put that all together, and the low-lying areas are in big trouble because the water doesn't stay exactly where it falls. It rolls down into the lower areas.
All right, Mark, I believe we have someone on the phone right now, Valerie Frausto. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Assistant Chief there with San Antonio Fire. Thanks for joining us here on the phone this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
So we're watching right now this water rescue that just took place here, a pretty incredible scene. Thankfully, this one ended on the right note. What else are you guys dealing with here at this hour?
Well, as of about 10:30 this morning, we've had 22 high water investigations. San Antonio Fire did not perform any swift water rescues with these types of calls. Most of them were for stalled vehicles where the occupants needed to just be walked away from their vehicles. There were 4 water rescues, and at that point in time, we had 0 technical water rescues of occupants actually needing to be actively rescued from their vehicle. The last one that occurred on Penn Road and 151 was the one that was televised, and that one ended successfully. We've also had several lightning strikes, structure fires, about 7 power lines, a total of 7 structure fires actually reported to be caused by lightning, and multiple fire alarms and other vehicle collisions on the highway.
Can you tell us a little bit about the logistics of that? I mean, you've got fire trucks at a water rescue, fire trucks at fires from lightning, other calls that happen. How does that work out through a day like this? What does the weather do to just your personnel and your staffing and basically the logistics of a severe weather day?
Well, actually, I think we handled it extremely well, provided the number of calls that came in a short period of time. It definitely was a stretch on our resources and personnel, but we managed to handle the call volume quite well.
And Valerie, as we're working our way through the rest of this afternoon, I know it's been a really busy time out there. Are there certain spots right now that are of more concern for you guys?
There are certain problem areas that are our usual problem areas that experience flash flooding during heavy rain periods. But overall, the city actually, received quite a bit of rain in a short period of time, so I can't really identify certain areas of town that were affected worse than others. It was pretty much, the entire city.
Do you know if the spot where you just had that active water rescue, was that a spot that typically floods? Is that a known low-lying area that you have these kinds of problems when it rains this hard?
Yes, it is.
Is there anything that's set up to, warn drivers that this is an area that does flood?
Oh, absolutely. There's many problematic areas in the city, and our public works are very good about setting up barricades. We ask people to, not pass through the barricades and turn around and don't drown. But a lot of times they try, to cross over, thinking maybe the water has receded or their vehicles may be able to make it across the bridge or a problematic area. And a lot of times they end up, stalled out and needing to be rescued.
Do you know if the barricades were up today, or did the rain happen faster than the barricades could?
No, I believe the barricades were already up at this location.
Does that I know, like in, I believe it's Arizona, that if someone does somehow get around a barricade, there are laws in place that make them pay for the rescue. Is there anything like that on the books in your jurisdiction?
Absolutely, there is.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about how that works? Is it just dollar for dollar? It's on the person that went around the barricade?
That is correct.
Wow.
It's a flat rate for crossing barricades, and they do get fined. And it's also dependent on the type of rescue that is needed.
And so what are your plans for the rest of the day? Do we watch the weather, wait for the calls? Is there anything proactive you can do on a day like this? Do you try to staff near where you know there are those problem areas?
No, we normally augment the water rescue staffing at the technical rescue stations, and we definitely monitor the incoming weather, and we're doing that currently from our dispatch center. So we're just going to keep a close eye on things and try to get resources, wherever they're needed.
And as you said, you think this today overall, including the rescue that we just watched, went basically as well as it could go?
Yes.
Is there anything from past events or even this event that you guys learned that you're going to be able to implement in the future?
No, we deal with every incident as it comes. Every incident is, special in its own way, and there's really place to be able to predict, the outcome of every run, because every run is different, and there's different, approaches to every scene.
I mean, that really is the incredible part of this story, right? I mean, there's only so much training that these swiftwater rescue teams can go through, because every event really is different.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Our hats are off to all of the responders out there. I mean, I was getting vertigo just watching them, and they're the ones doing the hard work. So that's Valerie Frausto, Assistant Chief of San Antonio Fire. Thanks so much for joining us today. What a scene out there.
No doubt. And thankfully, the one that we just saw ended well. Could have been a much, much worse situation there. What we're looking at here from moments ago, water rescue taking place. You can see this was not a small, compact car. We're looking at an SUV. So a lot of folks think, oh, I've got an SUV, I'll be fine. No, that is not the case, and this is proof right there for you. SUV can be swept away just as easily, and that was the case here. If it was not for that guardrail keeping it in place, well, this could have been a really a tragic situation. So again, from moments ago, water rescue taking place, you had the rescue teams basically putting out their ladder, then adding another ladder to that to get to this gentleman who was on the top of their car.
And again, if you're just tuning in, rain started early this morning in San Antonio and then continued basically right through now. The rain rate has come down a lot, but flash flood warnings continue officially in Bexar County until 12:15 local time. So we have about 45 minutes left on that or so. You're watching Weather Center Live. We're right here at the bottom of the hour. And again, if you're just joining us, I'm meteorologist Mark Elliott, meteorologist Alex Wallace, and meteorologist Carl Parker, all in studio with you today following just a crazy scene. This was the rescue as it happened just moments ago here in Bexar County, right in San Antonio, in, Alex, one of those spots that is known for flooding and known for problems when there is this much rain in this short a time.
And as you mentioned, it was a lot of rain. And at one point in a 3-hour period there, we were talking about as much rainfall that has fallen there in San Antonio in the last 3 months. So we certainly got a big dose of the rain, and it led to scenes like this. And if I'm not mistaken, I heard that there were actually barriers that were up around this area, and unfortunately it looks like this person did not heed the warnings and the barriers.
I believe we can actually also show you what this area looks like in a generally dry day. Here's the wide view of San Antonio, and we're going to fly in. This is now getting all the way down to ground level. near, I believe it's 151, and so the road kind of on the foreground of your screen, where you see the trees in the center, it's just in front of that. That's normally it's a bridge, but it's a bridge that's often on kind of a dry arroyo. It's not usually an area that has water unless it's an event like this. So now looking at this, there's the bridge, there's the guardrail where that car was stopped, and so right across here on the left side of your screen, that is the road that is currently completely underwater. Water is just racing its way through here. So you can see that there is the guardrail is right in here, and that is where the car was pinned, and the rescue happening with a fire truck placed here as well as another vehicle here, both trying to get to that vehicle that was stopped right in the center of the roadway.
So it just goes to show you, yeah, it's a usually dry looking area, but you get that kind of rain that we've seen this morning and during the early part of the afternoon. That led to some flooding. Look at some of the rainfall accumulation estimates here from the radar over the last 6 hours, approaching 4 inches here for us right in that general area west of downtown San Antonio.
You could argue that a lot of that rainfall actually happened in far less than 6 hours. Yes, that's a 6-hour total, but there were rainfall rates at times within here approaching 2 to 3 inches per hour. So you had this just opening up of the skies that really set the stage, and then this is a low-lying area. So rain not just from where we're standing, but from the whole region gets funneled into those low-lying areas. You don't just wind up with 4 inches of water just because it rained 4 inches there. You wind up with feet upon feet of fast-moving flowing water as it races its way into those low-lying areas through the typically dry arroyos, the washes, the floodplains. That's how those areas were formed in the first place, right? You had all those years upon years, millennia, if you will, of water rushing in. When it's dry, you could walk across it without even getting your feet wet. But on a day like this, it's a totally different scene.
Yeah, Mark, you mentioned really the key in all of this is the fast-moving water, and you clearly see that there on the left side of your screen. Again, this is from moments ago when the water rescue was happening. And look at that water there. And again, that's an area that would generally be dry. Looks like a raging river. So extremely fast-moving water, pinning this SUV, again, a pretty large vehicle, pinning it up against a guardrail there. Notice there's water actually seeping out of the windows and the doors there because the car itself has water completely in it. It's completely full here with water. So that's pouring out as well. And again, if it wasn't for the guardrail, this car would still be floating down this raging river, which again is just amazing.
And it's incredible, honestly, that the person that got in this bad spot was able to get onto the roof, because that person was fighting against all of that moving water. Probably had to go through the window because there's no way to open the door. On one side, you're getting slammed by the water. On the other side, you're pinned by the guardrail. So out through the window, up onto the roof, navigating that on a wet car, navigating that on a dry car is difficult enough, right? But here we go with they got out there. The rescue teams were in the right spot at the right time and were able to use really heroic methods in order to save that person.
You know, and as we said earlier, there really must have been a radical change from the time that he decided to go on this bridge. And by the way, we heard from the assistant fire chief that there may have been a barrier at the time, so he may have gone around a barrier to do this. But there must have been a radical change in the water level and the velocity of the water. Obviously, you're not going to drive into that. And so he drove through something that was considerably less than that, and it came up, the water rose, and it got much, much faster in a relatively short period of time. That is the very definition of a flash flood, and that's why we've said over and over again, we really hope that people don't drive through water. We know it can be a pain. We know there's a long way to go around in a lot of cases, but what you don't know is how fast the water is coming up, nor do you know exactly what the condition of the road underneath is going to be like. So you're taking a lot of chances when you go around barriers, and that's what this guy did. And now, you know, he came very close to losing his life, and now he'll be facing apparently some financial penalties as well.
Yeah.
They do this in Texas, we just heard.
And let's face it, Carl, this road is not going to be open once this water subsides for the very thing that you were just talking about. All of this rushing water that's going through is affecting the base layer of the road itself. It's a bridge, but there are supports to that bridge, and this is a lot of force. This is a lot of momentum and a lot of weight that is kind of chewing away at the ground that's holding up this road. So there's going to have to be surveys to make sure that road is passable even after the water comes down. It's just not worth trying to drive through an area even if there's far less water than what we're seeing here at the time.
I always like to talk about the weight of water because I think it's sort of staggering. If you were to take a box that people use to move in, that's 3 feet by 3 feet. 3 feet on the side, 3 feet tall, so a 3-foot cubic box, essentially. If you were to do that, take that box and fill it with water, first of all, you wouldn't be able to lift it. It would weigh exactly as much as a smart car, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. It's up around 1,800 pounds. And so there's a huge amount of weight in that water, and by extension there's a huge amount of force, especially when you've got that kind of velocity. So he's very lucky that the car was actually held in place by that barrier. The barrier could have given way. The car could have been lifted up and over top of the barrier. We've seen cars move around like toys in water like that. We've seen that many, many times before. So a lot of things worked out in the end, and he was lucky that he was in a stationary place to be able to be rescued by these guys.
You know, we're relatively familiar with moving air, right? We have the National Weather Service teams after a tornado surveying damage done by moving air, but water has such a higher mass, a higher weight, a load behind it than air does. Water moving at, what, 10 miles per hour can have the same effects, the same force as an EF2 to EF3 tornado. So, I mean, you think about this water, which even water on it just running off generally goes downhill somewhere between 6 and 12 miles per hour. So, Carl, I mean, we're talking about substantial weight, substantial force to this scene.
Yeah, and I don't really think that anyone could survive that. When you see that kind of velocity, I don't think there's any way you could survive that. So this is how close he came to losing his life, and our hats off to these amazing first responders out there in San Antonio.
And luckily, this rescue ended on a good note. There's still a flash flood warning. We'll update you further after the break.